Thanks for joining us, everyone. I'm Sergeant Chris Amsler of the Media Relations Unit for the Aurora Police Department. We're going to be holding a press conference today to discuss the officer-involved shooting/homicide that occurred at 745 Kenton Street on Saturday evening. Your speakers today will be Chief of Police Nicholas Metz, our Commander of our Investigations Bureau, Rob McGregor, and Carol O'Shea, who is the Supervisor of our Victim Services Unit. I'll now turn it over to Chief Metz.
Thank you, Chris. Again, my name is Nick Metz. I'm the Chief of Police with the Aurora Police Department, and just want to really quickly thank all of you for coming here to cover this very tragic story. As with every press conference, we always start off by saying that the investigation is continuing. It's still fluid. So everything that we tell you is the information that we have right now. It's certainly subject to change. And if we determine that there's any information that does change, we'll get that to you as quickly as possible. Basically, what I'm going to do right now is just kind of tee up what the occurrences were on Saturday night, and then I'm going to turn it over to Commander Rob McGregor of our investigations unit to kind of go over more of the details. But basically what you're going to hear this afternoon is that at 7:42 p.m. On Saturday night, our 911 center received a 911 call, and you will get a copy of the tape a little bit later. And I can tell you that the tape is incredibly chilling. And the tape is the mother calling in saying that she and her daughter are being attacked. Within 3 minutes of that 911 call, our first officer arrives on scene, and he encounters two people who are in the street in some kind of fight. And this happens about 5 houses north of where the disturbance initially began. When the officer arrived, neighbors said that they could hear the officer yelling several times, drop that knife, police," and then they heard two gunshots. Other officers arrived. Once they arrived, they began giving aid to the victim. They dragged her a little bit away from the scene and began giving her aid, and then they also began giving aid to the suspect while the Aurora Fire Department and ambulances were en route. As you know, both the victim and the suspect were transported to the hospital. Both died about an hour and about 2 hours later. I think what's really important to note here is that my officer, the initial one who encountered the attack that was occurring, probably saved a lot of lives that night. Number one, we believe the mother was probably coming down there to assist her daughter, and had he not gotten there and taken the action that he did, it's likely that the suspect could have turned back on the mother, who had already been stabbed by the suspect. We had neighbors who have said that they were ready to go out and confront the suspect because police weren't there yet, and again, may have helped protect their safety from that suspect. And as tragic as that situation turned out, and as tragic as this young woman lost her life, that officer pretty much gave her the only fighting chance at that moment to survive. And so it was because of his actions they were able to at least keep her alive, to get her to hospital for medical treatment, and sadly she didn't make it. The officer in this situation, we're not going to be identifying him at this point, but he's a 12-plus year veteran of the department. He has had one prior officer-involved shooting, and as is customary and protocol, he will be placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the investigation. At this time, I'm going to ask Commander Rob McGregor to come up, and he'll provide a bit more detail as to what happened that night.
Thank you, Chief. Good afternoon. As the Chief explained, our officers were dispatched to 745 North Kenton Street regarding a domestic violence call where a weapon was being used. The incident began inside the residence. The mother of the victim actually engaged the parties and gave the opportunity for our victim to flee the location. The victim ran down the street. The mother then proceeded to call 911 along with other people in the neighborhood. The suspect, who we're not going to identify at this time because he hasn't been positively identified, we believe has been a boyfriend of the of the victim for several weeks. The altercation or the incident continues down the street where the suspect continues to stab our victim. The 911 call comes in. Our officers are responding on scene. They see the suspect over the victim. At that point, our officer tells the suspect to drop the knife, which he refuses to do so, and the officer discharges his weapon. And as the chief explained earlier, life-saving measures were attempted on both the victim and the suspect. And that's pretty much how the situation went down. Responding scene. So we've got a House bill that's coming up where we have partnered up with the Denver Police Department. So they respond on all of our officer-involved shootings as we do with theirs. It's actually been a busy couple of weeks for both agencies. But so they responded also where they're paired up with our investigators, and they go through the entire investigation with us, watch the interviews, etc. So it's been actually a positive experience for both agencies. So we're already ahead of the pendulum as far as getting involved with what's being required by our state legislature.
Commander, how long did it take your officers to get there after the 911 call was placed?
As the chief explained earlier, it was about 3 minutes.
Any body cam? I thought you guys use those on some officers in the pilot phase right now.
There was one officer that did have a body cam, but we have not had an opportunity to interview that officer yet, so we haven't reviewed that footage either, but I think he came up, we believe, after the initial incident.
If they'd only known each other or had only been dating for a few weeks, any idea what the nature of that assault was? What was that all about?
We have no idea at this time.
Any prior calls to that address involving your agency or this couple?
There have been prior calls to that address, yes.
Can you elaborate on that?
I'm not going to elaborate on the calls that have been at that particular address and who was involved, but yes, we've had several calls that have been at that address.
Commander, why the delay in identifying him?
Because the coroner's got to do the process, and we've got to do the fingerprints, and then we've got to verify the fingerprints.
So prior record, do you know at all?
Once we figure out exactly who he is, and we'll be able to
Okay, so you really
provide
don't
that.
know that part yet?
Correct.
Is there anything that's of a part of that as far as American citizenship goes or anything like that?
Until we get him positively identified, we will not know.
But you do have an idea who he is. Can you tell us the guy that you suspect? Have you had dealings with him before?
I don't want to elaborate on that because we're not exactly sure who we're dealing with.
Commander, I know you're saying you're not saying who you helped at that address before, but could you tell us if it were the same couple? I mean, if this is a rented house, you know, it's one thing to respond to that address if it's different people living there. Have you responded to this house with these specific two individuals living there?
The daughter, we believe, lives there. Once we positively identify the suspect, then we'll have a better idea as to whether or not he was at the residence on prior calls.
But these were domestic violence related calls you responded to in the past?
I don't recall. There might have been one other DV that was at the location. There might have been one other one.
And that was in the last couple of weeks, you said?
Within the last 6 months.
You said that they were dating for several weeks, is that right?
That's what we believe, yes.
Did a restraining order exist?
Not that we're aware of.
A question for both you and the chief. You mentioned a few minutes ago that it's the other agency that you're dealing with in terms of the investigation. It's been a busy last few weeks for both of you guys, and it has been. Can either you or the chief talk about how many officer-involved shootings there have been in Aurora so far this year, compare that? Give us something to compare that to. And then I wanted to ask too, are you guys seeing people out there becoming more violent?
You want to?
Well, as far as the number of officer-involved shootings, I'm going to ask our PIO Sergeant Chris Amsler to get you that information so that we make sure everything that we give you is accurate. And again, because we have been doing joint investigations with Denver, we want to make sure that count is accurate. And I apologize, the second part of your question?
Are you guys seeing suspects out there becoming more violent?
Well, I think, as we said at the last press conference, was that we are seeing what we believe is an uptick of violence, particularly towards police officers. Now, in this situation, the police officers weren't the focus of attention of the suspect. This was a situation where our officer saw that somebody was in immediate need of aid that would be killed if he didn't take the action that he would take. And I'm incredibly proud of him and the officers who responded. You know, one of the other things I just definitely wanted to make a quick note is the fact that, and I'm not speaking about this situation because I don't really know, but the question was asked earlier about previous domestic violence situations and so forth. You know, in my 31 years of law enforcement experience, I've unfortunately seen a lot of domestic violence-related homicides. And in most of those situations, it's very rare that there hasn't been prior violence between the victim and the abuser. And I think as we go into the holiday season, and that's oftentimes we can see an uptick of domestic violence during the holiday seasons, it's really important to keep in mind that domestic violence is unfortunately alive and well within our community. It's a silent crime. It crosses all economic, racial, ethnic lines, and it's one of those crimes, as I said, a silent crime where people don't often report it because they know that there are mandatory arrests. They know that people's lives will be impacted, and there's the fear of retaliation if they call the police. But when it really comes down to it, we can't help the victims in our community, and we can't save the lives in our community if we don't know what's going on. And so, you know, my message to victims of domestic violence in our community is do not be afraid to call 911. We have a lot of resources in place to make sure that you remain safe, that can assist you through prosecution and other legal matters. And for the neighbors or family members who know that somebody is being abused, it's that old cliche, you know, see something, say something. Call us, let us know that domestic violence is happening within your home or your neighbor's home. Because again, too often we see the tragedies like what we saw Saturday night occur. That said, I wanted to introduce our victim advocate, Carol O'Shea, who runs our victim advocate program, and she's just going to provide a few safety tips and some numbers for folks to use in the event they are caught in that cycle of domestic violence or they know somebody who's caught in that cycle. Sure.
Thank you, Chief. So first I'd like to mention that we did have victim advocates respond to this event, and we have advocates who are continuing to provide services to the victim, the family of the deceased, and to the witnesses of this tragic event. Having said that, law enforcement advocacy is very focused on safety and on safety planning, and making sure that victims are connected with appropriate resources to help them move towards breaking that cycle of violence in their homes and with their families. I think one of the important things to mention, reiterating what the Chief has just said, is very often well-intended friends and family members think that their intervention or they're trying to help people is the answer, and it often puts them in harm's way as well. So connecting with appropriate professional services to help people do safety planning. And by the way, every victim is different, so maybe there's cultural considerations or needs to be considered in providing those resources. We do have evidence to the fact that most homicides and the highest lethality for victims is when they decide to leave relationships. So that's why it's so important that they get a professional involved in the safety planning. Every time we contact a victim of domestic violence, that's going to be our focus, is safety planning, and that they know the resources and that they involve their children in their schools, in the workplace, so our whole community can work towards being safer. We did provide some phone numbers. I think it's important to mention that the advocates for the Aurora Police Department are always here to help people get connected with appropriate resources, as is the expertise of Gateway Battered Women's Services, and we gave a national number because oftentimes people are concerned about family members out of state. I think the emphasis should be for the abused, the abuser, concerned family members, and community members to connect with professional resources and really get in touch with what's out there. Thank you.
Has the victim's mom said if she was trying to leave, and that's what led up to this attack?
I'm going to let you answer.
I think that still remains to be determined. There's still a lot more investigation we need to do. We still need to be able to talk to the mom a little bit more to get a better history of what was going on.
Chief, since November 30th, I count 6 officer-involved shootings across the metro. Just 2 weeks. Are the bad guys getting more brazen?
Well, I'll answer the same way I answered before. I mean, I think we have seen a bit of what we believe is an uptick of violence, particularly towards police officers. But again, in this situation, this was not. Again, our officers were not the focus of the attack. This was a helpless victim who was being viciously attacked, and our officer got there and did what he had to do to try to save her life.
Chief, there's a lot of emotion involved in domestic violence, a lot of emotion, which makes it dangerous for you guys. What does it say when police are commanding that guy to drop the knife and he's not doing it?
Well, I mean, just like what we tell everybody, you follow a police officer's instructions. If an officer tells you to drop a knife, put your hands up, follow those instructions. Domestic violence calls are one of the most dangerous calls that our officers can respond to because, as you said before, it's very emotional. They can be very volatile. And oftentimes what might start off seeming like a fairly low-key situation can escalate in a minute. So, our officers are given the best training possible with crisis intervention training, with, handling domestic violence calls, all those type of things. But we can't control human behavior and we can't predict human behavior. So our officers do what they're taught, and that is try to do their best to take control of the situation immediately upon entering a house or wherever it is they're dealing with one of these situations, and getting those folks separated, hopefully, and being able to handle that situation and resolve it peacefully.
Chief, if you told us, can you tell us what kind of knife or like the size that he was using? And then 2, was anybody else at the home with the mother and daughter, like children or other family members?
I'm not aware if anybody else was at the home. You're shaking your head no, there wasn't? Okay, so as it seems right now, the only people at the home were the mother, the deceased daughter, and the suspect. As far as the knife, we can't show you the knife right now because we're still in the midst of the investigation, but I can describe the knife as a large knife.
Is it a kitchen knife or a hunting knife?
We're going to stick with large knife for right now.
Do we know roughly how many times he struck her with the knife?
I don't know. That's information that will have to come from the coroner's office.
What about the mom? I mean, was the mom injured by the knife too?
Yes, she was.
Can you say how many times she was stabbed?
I think multiple, but my understanding, obviously, it wasn't life-threatening, but she
Is she still
did succeed.
hospitalized?
I don't know.
You mentioned that witnesses heard 2 gunshots. Based on your investigation, how many times did your officer fire?
We're still investigating that part.
Do we know how many times the suspect was hit?
That'll come from the coroner.
Can you ever just how brazen it is for this guy to continue stabbing after an officer has told him to stop?
I think you answered it. It's pretty brazen. I mean, to be doing that and to be told several times to drop the knife. The guy obviously either wasn't hearing the officer or was completely ignoring him.
I know the identity of the victim is going to come through the coroner, but can you maybe tell us her age?
Approximately 28 years of age.
Okay, one more question?
I have a quick question about the last time that we were here and the officer that was hacked in the head.
Mhm.
How's he doing?
He's doing remarkably well. He's still out. He's still got some healing to do, but he's going to be fine. He's going to be fine. Thank you. Thank you for asking. With that, again, thank you for being here. We did talk to you a little bit about domestic violence. I would really ask the media to really put a focus on domestic violence for this coming holiday season and help us get the word out. We're going to be doing our best, but it would really be nice if you guys could assist us with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it.
And we did have a handout with some of those important numbers. We'll also be